And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap. I'm Phoenix, and I'm joined tonight by Nikki. How you going, Nikki?
Quite pleased after Saturday night.
Yeah, it was a pretty comprehensive victory, I agree, and sees us in a pretty good position now. So we'll go through everything. Obviously, no SANFL this week, so and really not a huge amount to talk about from the game. So I'd expect that we'll whiz through this reasonably efficiently. But you never know. We might disagree on something, Nick, and then, who knows what happens after that.
Maybe.
No Macca tonight. I think he's been a bit crook, so he might pop in at some point, but otherwise we'll just carry on regardless. So I'll just go through the weekend's results, and of course Friday night we had, just can't pick these teams. Richmond getting up over Collingwood, 14-8 to 11-11. Richmond getting up by 15 after being absolutely woeful the week before, and Collingwood looking quite reasonable, so who knows what the hell's going on there. Saturday we had the pair.
Loss of Darcy Moore.
Oh, yeah, probably. He's been quite good for them this year, and certainly they didn't really have much of a structure going up forward. Saturday we had Sydney getting over the Power quite comfortably by 67 points, 14-16 to 4-9. The Power season just about over for the year. Melbourne keeping it interesting by getting up over the Hawks by 29 points, 17 goals 8, 11 goals 15. So the Hawks only one clear now, and still within reach if they happen to drop one over in the West or something like that. The Suns and the Giants had a good game. The Giants ended up getting up with the last two goals of the match, 14 goals 8 to 13 goals 6. So a good showing by the Suns, and a little bit unconvincing by the Giants. You're just wondering whether they're starting to feel for the finish line a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see what sort of form they carry into the final series. Western Bulldogs with a gutsy, low-scoring win against a disappointing Kangaroos. Top 8 team only scoring 47 points. Is, I don't know how that's acceptable, but the Bullies getting up 9 goals 7 to 7 goals 5, 14 points. And of course, today we had the Saints pretty convincing winners over a disappointing Carlton, 19 goals 8 to 7 goals 9. I expected this game to be a little bit closer, so the Saints in pretty solid late season form. The Cats only really getting up by 11 goals over Essendon. Essendon were pretty plucky all game and certainly did play the same as they did against us the week prior, and certainly tried hard, just lack a few avenues to goal. But it was a good result from Adelaide Crow's point of view. Cats only getting up by 66. And just recently, the West Coast getting up over a reasonably gallant Dockers, 17 goals 8 to 9 goals 10. So the Eagles getting up by 46. Anything surprising in there, Nick?
Well, for me, the interesting correlation is between the Collingwood and North Melbourne, because North lost Ben Brown through the game.
Yep.
And once they lost him, they just stopped scoring.
Yep.
And it's very interesting because, to me, Darcy Moore straightens up Collingwood.
Yep.
He forces them to go down that centre and gives the others good opportunity to score. And you could probably say the same thing with North. Now that they've sent Waite in for surgery and they don't know how long he's going to be out, and now losing Brown possibly for who knows how long, they're in real strife.
Well, they're cooked, and St Kilda is still a sneaky chance.
Yeah.
If I was St Kilda right now, I'd be sniffing blood, and if I was North, I'd be wondering where the next win's going to come from with their run home. So, and to be perfectly honest with you, despite early season form by the Kangaroos, St Kilda are probably the more deserving of a top 8 spot. To be honest, I'd rather see an in-form St Kilda get some finals experience rather than North Melbourne, who I think next year are going to fall off the cliff if they haven't already. Yeah, we'll see how that pans out over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, Hawthorn, just running through the ladder. Hawthorn now
that was a good
clear.
game.
Yeah, I didn't watch. The only game I watched was ours. So if you've got any insight there, but by all reports, Melbourne, well, clearly they played pretty well, particularly in the last quarter, because wasn't it pretty close at three-quarter time?
It was very close, and every time Hawthorn seemed to get a sniff and was about to get that run on, Melbourne stopped them. They just did really well to back away from the Hawthorn players, give themselves a little bit of space, quick little handballs out the back. They had a very little set game plan, and Hawthorn couldn't counter it. And I was looking at it going, I've seen us play something similar to that.
Yeah, keeping the ball away from Hawthorn is not a bad tactic, actually. It tends to be how Hawthorn play. Dominating uncontested possession and just picking their way through zones and whatnot with good disposal. So interesting. Hawthorn not really convincing, even though they're top. But we all know that they can turn it on come September. So I will be very interested to see, and I think the West Coast game next week will be a really clear indication about whether they're a genuine premiership threat or whether they're just limping slightly coming into the finals, because if they end up even with Sydney, Adelaide and GWS, and Geelong for that matter, they could slide into the second half of the 8, and it's a much harder road from there, as we all know. So the ladder, we've got Hawthorn still on top, game clear, but terrible percentage. Then, as mentioned, we've got Sydney on 144, Adelaide on 141.2, GWS on 140.2, Geelong Cats on 137, West Coast on 131, on 52 points as well, a win back, along with Western Bulldogs also, but 116 Western Bulldogs, and then North Melbourne just falling over the line in a little bit of danger on 111.5 percentage. St Kilda now only 2 games out of it with 3 to go. On 95%, so their percentage is starting to pick up. Port still a mathematical chance, obviously, along with Melbourne, but you would dare say that with a shellacking coming up against us in the showdown, their season's done. Melbourne have shown a fair bit this year, and I reckon they'd be quietly pleased with their season. Also on 36 points, and then we've got the unpredictable Collingwood and Richmond on 32 points, frustrating their supporters. Gold Coast and Carlton on 24, Freo on 12, the hapless Lions on 8, and Essendon on 4. Quite surprising, considering I've felt the couple of times I've watched Essendon of late, they really have shown quite a good, or made quite a good account of themselves. So whereas Brisbane were woeful. So
they still need to do second efforts though. They get good things and they'll do something and then they stop and wait for somebody else. It's like, go in and help your mate.
Yeah,
that frustrates me with them.
Well, it's interesting. I watched a little bit of the game this afternoon, making a lie of what I said earlier. It just had it on in the background, and a couple of times I was just watching Essendon's forward 50 entry, and there's a bit of Don Pike about what John Worsfold's doing with Essendon. They play Danaher very high.
Bit.
Yeah, well, they play Danaher very high, and he's their hit-up target quite regularly. They play fairly high, all their forwards, and then they're looking for space out the back, or at least to kick into an open forward line. And it did look eerily familiar at times. So I wonder whether that's a carryover from some old West Coast tactics years gone by. I'm not sure, but it was quite interesting. Obviously, the game that we're interested in. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, or him figuring out that Danaher's actually a better long kick because he thinks of it like a field kick and he's actually quite good, but he put him in close, he's just shite.
Yeah, he's going to be a dangerous player if he can ever straighten himself up, but certainly as a high-playing hit-up forward, not dissimilar to, say, a Nick Riewoldt style. He certainly hasn't got Riewolt's engine, but certainly he's got the physique and the marking power. If they can find a secondary tall forward down there with half a clue and a few skills, could be a little bit dangerous next year. But we're interested in the shellacking on Saturday night, Nikki, and Adelaide got up, as everyone knows, 27 goals, 15, 177 to the Lions, 6 goals, 3, 39. Crows winning by 138 points, just missing our all-time biggest winning margin. And I must admit, at one stage there, I was thinking we might hit the 30 mark, but pretty good return by the boys. What do you reckon?
I was very annoyed at halftime. We didn't kick 100 points. We were a goal off. I was very upset.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, we kicked 7 goals. And then we went backwards and only kicked 6.
When we kicked 6?
And the last quarter, was it 6 in the last quarter?
5 in the last quarter.
Oh, 5 in the last quarter. There, see, we went backwards even more. Yeah. It's very upsetting.
7, 7, 8, and 5. But having said that, I still thought we ran the game out reasonably well. Let's quickly look at the head-to-head stats. We absolutely smashed them in disposals.
These are scary.
I think I read on the scoreboard at half-time they'd only had 87 disposals or something at half-time, is what I read, or it could have been 87. I'm sure it was 87 disposals.
Yeah, I think they only had 87. And they actually played better in the first half than they did in the second.
Yeah.
But it was just, what the hell? I've never seen a game that lopsided, I don't think.
No. I'll touch on Lepic's presser afterwards. But I felt early when they were, up and about. I thought Zorko and those more senior players were certainly putting in, and I thought Mitch Robertson was trying pretty hard. But my goodness, it falls away on their list pretty quick. But anyway, let's run through these. 477 disposals to 284. Happily, we were back to a 1 to 1.1 kick-to-handball ratio, which was good, 254 and 223 respectively. We took 128 marks to 38. I've never, ever, ever seen such a marking disparity. Only 57 tackles to their 75ers because they rarely had the ball. Hit-outs fairly even, 39 to 44. I thought Riley O'Brien, and we'll touch on individuals later, but Riley O'Brien had a good first hit-out. Frees were even. Our conversion was okay, 64%. We didn't seem to overuse the ball too much, 17.5 disposals per goal and 11.3 disposals per scoring shot. 73 to 29 inside 50s. My goodness. And we scored from half our forward 50 entries. So, that points to an all-out shellacking, doesn't
it? As American Crows just said on the chat, it's hard to mark when you never possess the footy.
Yeah, well, that's right. Just amazing. And if we run through the rest of them here, reasonably close and contested ball. They actually won the clearances around the stoppage, and therefore we won the centre clearances, but overall they were 4 up. But uncontested possessions, 325 to 143. They just couldn't get the ball off us. 80% disposal efficiency for us. 18 to 10 contested marks. 18 contested marks in the context of the disposals means that we just had a lot of uncontested play. 19 marks inside 50, which is unforgivable, really, for them. That's really about it.
At the game, we made the comment at quarter time, going, well, we know what Pikey wants them to practice this week. It's lowering your eyes and hitting up that short target 40 metres out from goal.
God, wasn't it so much better than watching the bombing that's been happening over the last couple of weeks?
Third quarter kind of went but a little bit.
Yeah, but overall we did drop the eyes, and I felt we were looking to hit up targets. And it was a much more efficient brand of football, even though we did... it's hard not to slip into overuse at times. And our disposal early on was disgraceful. For no particular reason. Someone asked on the ball. It was horrible.
I like the first lot of disposals were pretty good at the start of the game.
Well, yeah, the first 12 seconds were great.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah. But, I was sitting in the Western Stand with my head in my hands at some of the shanks that were going on in that first quarter. But never mind. Some individual stats, Nikki. And Rory Sloane, absolute beast, even though he didn't top the disposal count. I felt Rory Sloane and Daniel Talia were probably our best two. Probably best game I've seen Talis play for a while.
Which Rory?
Sloane.
Well, Lady was probably maybe just behind those two or fighting with them.
I agree.
Because he was still so influential.
Yep, I agree. I just felt Sloaney was probably, just for his work rate and his double-up efforts at contests, was just pretty special. 34 disposals, 16 kicks, 18 handballs. Rory led 11 kicks, 25 handballs. But a lot of those handballs were actually quite aggressive. They weren't get-out handballs. But I thought Tales, even though the opposition wasn't great, is probably the best I've seen Daniel play in terms of his positioning and his willingness to take on the contest for quite some time. So a bit of a confidence booster.
Yeah,
for
I think
Daniel.
it was up there with one of his best games.
Yep, 13 marks. I reckon a lot of those were intercept marks.
He definitely gave Shaki a lesson in what you need to be in order to play it or play against the best defenders.
Yeah.
He was often leading Shaki to the ball.
Yeah, that's right. And Shaki was often feeling for Talia in the contest, and he got caught out once or twice as a consequence. He's a very young player and will be better for the experience.
Yeah, he's going to be very good.
Oh, yeah. They've got a few, and we might just touch on that in a little minute. But I felt Brad Crouch had a really good game, 34 disposals, a little bit lopsided in the handball count, but you get that with Brad, and he was playing inside. 6 tackles along with his 34 disposals, 22 of which were handballs. The thing I liked about Brad was his inside
and
work.
As somebody said, we saw him, as I explained, running on top of the ground. And there was that bit in the third quarter where he just put that little burst of speed on that he has that we don't see him use that often. And to me, that was, he's got confidence in his body again.
Yeah, I mentioned that to my son, who I was at the footy with as well. That it's the best I reckon I've seen Brad move all season. So augurs well that he's fit and firing, which is good. I thought Matt was also pretty good. 18 kicks, 14 handballs, 6 marks, 6 inside 50s. Disposal a bit ratty at times, but other than that, no real complaints. Interesting game from Matt, though. Only 6 contested possessions, so he was playing outside the contest a bit more. 27 uncontested possessions out of his 32. Going at 90% as disposal efficiency. So, not the usual game that we see from Matt. He's usually a bit more inside.
Yeah, I reckon that they definitely were trying a few different things, but particularly in that midfield.
Yep. Lots of different looks, actually. Sorry, we're on a bit of a delay tonight, so if there's a few gaps, we're just waiting for each other to speak, for those who are listening. Go on, Nick.
For a bit of fun. No, for me, I actually liked it at one stage. The midfield was the 2 Crouches and Lions, as well as Rob, and I'm thinking, that's not, most people would look at that going, that's a really slow midfield, but they're all 3 of them, not both, are really fast decision makers, so they move the ball quickly. So whilst their leg speed might not appear to be fast, they can still move the ball fast.
Yeah. There was a couple of lineups where I mentioned that it's not a centre square lineup that you're going to expect to see all that often. Cam Ellis-Yeoman with one of the Crouch boys and and a Lions or something like that. Lots of different looks. I felt the other player I was really pleased with was Taylor Walker. I felt he's bounced back from his injury really well. He looked to be playing with some purpose and aggression. So it's good to see him fit and firing.
And he was jumping.
Yes, with confidence. 22 disposals, 17 of which were kicks. 12 marks, doing a lot of lead-up work. 4 goals, 7 inside 50s. Did really well. Probably the best game I've seen Tex play in terms of his movement for quite some time.
It was quite funny watching him get annoyed that other people kept running in front of him and marking.
Yeah, Tommy Lynch did that at one stage.
He was not happy with Lynch on a number of occasions. I think he did it twice.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, it was for me." He was
Yeah.
Like, sorry, Tex.
Yeah, at one stage it looked like he was gesturing about some sort of set play, and I think Lynch was supposed to leave it for Tex to come in behind, but Lynchy ended up taking the mark, so hey, don't complain. The other bloke I thought was really good, particularly in the first half, I thought Jakey Lever had an exceptional first half. Again, you can talk about the relative lack of opposition, but Jake was positioning himself particularly well, and his outlet disposals were quite aggressive and creative, and I felt like he made some really good decisions. He only ended up with 17 disposals, 10 and 7, with the 5 marks, but I just felt, particularly in the first half, I was watching it back today, and he was quite prominent down back, so I thought he had a really strong game as well, Jake Lever.
It was funny actually watching him when we'd kind of slowed them up on our half forward line, and we could then position up. So even though he had a man, he would drop back, and so he was kind of pretending to be the loose man, but also had a man, but he was within range that he could do either. And I was really pleased to see him do that, and just watching that defence work and pointed at each other, okay, I can't get him, you need to man that one up. So at one stage, I think we had Hardigan on one of their really, I think on Green, and he stayed on him until we could get the switch effectively.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was that really nice trust between them, which is what, who were they talking to after the game that I heard? Smithers, I think. And he was saying that, yeah, that's what they've been trying to work on, is that their transition back to defence.
Yeah. And
that's what Pike's been pleased with for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. It was our defensive setup was quite noticeable. Despite the fact that, particularly in the first half, the game was almost played in one sector of the ground, like a 25% or a quarter of the ground sector, particularly around stoppage. So the play was quite congested in one quarter of the ground as it moved around the ground. It opened up a bit after half time, but it was quite noticeable that we're always goal side. Defence, we're always the last player between, the ball and the opposition's goals, and we always have a guy. It's almost a zone, but not quite. We always play someone in that whole situation, whether it be Cheney or Lever. So kind of very effective when the hurried kick out of the contest. We seem to have someone between the next contest and where the ball is at the moment. And that was quite consistent throughout the game.
No, and that's really good to see. I mean, if it wasn't either of those two, then it's Laddie. So the ones that we know have got really good hands. And if Lever's not going to mark it, we know that he's going to punch the crap out of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's not really too much tactically to discuss. I felt we looked far better moving the ball by foot this week than we did trying to run through zones last week by hand. It looked more natural. Despite the first, or other than the first 15 minutes or so, our disposal was reasonably good. And what I really enjoyed, and it was probably due to the opponent more than anything else, was our ability or the return of that diagonal kick into the corridor. Our switching wasn't quite as slow, and often our ball movement was quite dynamic and aggressive. So we were chipping into that into the centre square off half back, and then gaining some run through the corridor, which was good to see.
I mean, Lepic actually said at the quarter time interview that he was trying to get his players to keep playing on the thinner side. Did he say the thinner side? Yeah, I think the thinner side of the ground. So the western side, that's where he wanted that play to happen. He was obviously very conscious of if he allowed us to have space, it was going to be ugly, or probably even more ugly than what it turned out to be. The other one that transition was the Hardigan, the out in the full.
Yeah.
And just those couple of kicks straight down to the Lynch goal. I mean, that's what we've seen a couple of times already this year. And you watch that happening, and I just think any other side in the 8 would just look at that and go, shit.
Well, it's really pretty to watch. I mean, the overall feeling I get from a game like that is that you can't really judge game plan and structures and all that too much. I mean, Brisbane was certainly up for the fight in the first quarter, but after that, they didn't have the legs, they didn't have the tactical nous, they didn't have the experience to run the type of plays or to counter the type of plays that we were running. I was really pleased to see that Lepic essentially maintained a man-on-man approach throughout the game. He wasn't tempted to throw players back to stop the bleeding. I feel like there's no point in doing that for a team that he's coaching at the moment. Better just let him run and play and try and get the ball.
Yeah, who are going to get smashed.
Yeah, and he said as much in his after-match presser, and I will just touch on that in a moment. But yeah, I mean, obviously that allowed us to kick a bit of a cricket score because we clearly outclassed them on the deck, both personnel-wise and just with their ability to move the ball. But, there's far sterner tests ahead, Nicky, where a lot of this transition work and this our work by hand and foot is going to be tested under far more pressure. But I think games like that can work you back into form simply through repetition and being able to pull off a few things. It doesn't matter who the opposition is. So the fact that we were able to attempt and pull off a lot of ball movement that's been lacking over the last couple of weeks, I think will augur well for the remaining 3 games and hopefully into the final series.
Well, you just look at Smithers finally getting a goal, and his last quarter, he took it up another notch. He'd been playing quite well, but once he finally got that goal after he's been having all of those misses, you can just see, and that gave him that little bit of confidence.
That goal was unbelievable. He's kicked that like it was almost a sideways drop punt off 2 steps from 50, and it just went like a tracer bullet. I mean, I was pretty much sitting almost behind that, like on that angle, and it's just like it was like a rifle shot off his boot. Just amazing. He actually had a good game. 8 tackles, Brodie Smith, along with his 25 posies, 7 marks. I felt like he worked his way into it. We need Brodie Smith up and firing and being that attacking player. And I felt like he returned a little bit to that. It was still a little bit sloppy by foot at times. He only went at 52% disposal efficiency. I feel like a player like him with such a natural and distinctive kicking style, it's like a golfer with a bad technique. Once they lose their eye for it or just drop form a tad, it can go horribly wrong. So I'd like to see Brodie just reset himself on his disposal over the off season, because it's getting more hooky and more hooky the more he plays at the moment.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Some of them are, and some of them are still those sublime ones that we've seen before. I think he did always used to shank a couple every so often, but we kind of didn't notice it as much because we're noticing him more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that could be true. I think what I've noticed with him over the last month or two is that he's not making quite as clean contact with the ball when he kicks it. And that, to me, illustrates that he's kicking across the ball rather than through it. Matt Crouch is another one who does that consistently. He kicks across the ball. His foot is going from outside to inside. So he's not kicking the ball flush. He's actually giving it a glancing blow with his foot. And that's why they pop up and float and helicopter and all the rest of it. He needs to be kicking through the ball a bit more, which when he does those little lace-out passes and they work, it's actually because he's straightened himself up and kicked through the ball.
I think that probably comes, for him, it's a little bit of posure as well because he's always in a lot of traffic.
Yeah, that said, you've got a guy like Rory Atkins who, again, did much better, 80% disposal efficiency, kicked the ball 12 times. I thought Rory played a little bit better. Let's just briefly touch on the new players that we had in this week. Riley O'Brien, I thought, had an excellent debut. Yes, he was up against a second gamer himself, but I felt like his second efforts were really noticeable. His ruck work was certainly acceptable, 29 hit-outs. His goal was fantastic. It would have been great to see him get that running goal early, but for him to slot one was really good. And I thought he...
That was very Rob.
Yeah. Look,
the fact that he actually took the shot was, for me, really pleasing because at the start of this season, he was still really tentative. And even when he was within range in the SANFL, he was always looking to pass it off. Somebody else kick this, not me.
Well,
and I've seen him slowly come out of his shell and take the chances.
I don't think anyone would have accepted a handoff from him because I think the rest of the team were all saying, "No, kick the bloody goal." But he did well. And I think he allayed any fears of a massive impact if we were to lose Source. Obviously, we don't want to lose Source to a big injury, but I think Riley O'Brien showed that he would be a most able replacement in that event.
And now everybody understands why every time we go, we need to get a ruckman, and I keep going, no, we don't. And Hunter's also doing quite nicely as well. So I think we've picked up another really good one in Hunter, who's probably the build is more like Jenkins, and he plays a bit like Jenkins, but he's a bit harder at the ball.
I actually
in terms of hitting packs.
Yeah, I actually think our list profile in terms of ruckman is pretty much right now. We've got our number one, we've got our understudy. And we've got our really green one. And I think there was a time there where there was a bit of a mismatch in terms of the types that we had, with Source and Marich in the same list. We were always going to lose one of them, whereas at the moment I think our profile is about right. I thought Cam Ellis-Yeoman had a good return to the AFL team, particularly considering he wasn't playing huge minutes in the middle. I felt like he was quite effective. How did you see his game, Nick?
I really liked a lot of his possessions. They were very proactive. I also really liked using him up forward a lot because when you saw him stand next to Walker, he's not much shorter than Walker.
No, he's 189.
And this is our resting midfielder.
He's a
big boy.
Yep.
And you just kind of look at any other defences going, we need a key position defender to go on the resting midfielder. And they don't have enough of them.
Look, and it gives our midfield a different look as well. And we've said it whenever Cam's played in the ones. He gives our midfield a completely different look. He's sneaky, not fast, but he's got sneaky pace. His bulk allows him to get his arms clear and give off in tight. His kicking is far better than what people suggest it is. It's not the most fluent kick you've ever seen in your life, but it's certainly far more effective than it was a few years ago. And you're right, up forward, he's very effective. And for him to kick that drop punt goal and emulate Jared Lyons from Eddie's pocket, probably the hardest drop punt on the ground to kick out there.
Did you notice that when both of them marked the ball, that Eddie was right up next to them straight away and having a little chat before the umpire sent him away?
Yeah.
And I reckon he was actually telling them where to aim. And Cam said in the post interview that Eddie came up to him afterwards and said, "Stay away from my pocket." But I think he was actually telling them where to aim at. This is where you kick it from.
Well, it was
very good evening. Apologies.
Hey, there he is.
Just went out for dinner and only just got home. I'm sorry, I must have eaten too much.
I drank too much.
That could have happened too.
Nicky, just on that, it was interesting because you would see from the wrong side for a right footer in the pocket like that, you would see most players try to kick that inside out drop punt if they're going to try a drop punt that starts outside the goal face and swings back in. And yet both of those boys kicked to the near post and allowed for that natural draw that most drop punts from a right footer would get. And they judged them both to perfection. They were very good kicks.
I thought that was freakish. The both Lyons, and you talk about Lyons and Cameron Ellis-Yeoman.
Yep.
They were magnificent shots, and exactly as you described it. To have the confidence to actually try it. I was actually pleased that they did, and I was actually pleased that they actually got it.
Yeah. Who else do we have here? I thought the only disappointing player for the game for mine was Richard Douglas. I felt like this was a game that he could have got back some confidence, and for him only to get the 7 and 7 for 14 touches, and really, he didn't trouble the scoreboard. He only laid the 4 tackles. Really, not one stat there that really stands out, and he's got to be on a knife edge in terms of selection, in my opinion.
I think it could almost be that Cam stays in and he goes out.
Well, I'll let you go first, Dickie, because that's exactly what I was thinking, that if Richard does get dropped, it would be for Cam Ellis-Yeoman, because he's shown that he can play half forward, where Douglas is spending a fair bit of time, but also he showed that he's a more than useful on-baller.
Well, interestingly,
or do we want Cam to get the McGarry?
Oh, he might get it anyway, but I don't think anyone would give a shit about that, to be perfectly frank. But the fact is that both Douglas and Ellis-Yeoman were playing the same role, and I don't think that was actually by accident. And when you look at it in the cold light of day, Ellis-Yeoman was more effective in his midfield rotations and more effective up forward than Richie Douglas. And I don't think the question is, does Ellis-Yeoman make way for Tomo? I think the question is, does Douglas make way for Tomo?
The only thing that might save Douglas is that, to some degree, Tomo and Cam Ellis-Yeoman are a bit like for like, whereas Douglas and Tomo are two totally different creatures, and which puts a little bit more variety in the team. That's the only thing I think that could sort of save Douglas, because he was very, very quiet in terms of relative speaking with the amount of attack that we had.
Well, it's interesting, Macca, because we were just talking before you finally dragged your sorry ass in here that Matt Crouch played a lot more outside than normal. He had 27 uncontested possessions out of his 32, which means that really Jared Lyons played a bit inside-outside. But really, you could probably have Tomo and CEY as your two inside midfielders, with Lyons and Crouch sort of switching in and out, Matt Crouch that is, and Sloaney and Brad as your more outside types. Look, I think the setup works. We're not getting anything out of Richard Douglas. It doesn't matter whether he plays inside, outside or no side at the moment. And I don't think he deserves his place at the moment, to be honest, and I don't think he's deserved his place for quite a few weeks.
It's a little bit vicious, but as you were to me, of course. And but Yeah, he would be. It would be on a knife edge, but he's had his moments. But at the moment, I think he used to play a lot more in the midfield, and at the moment he's being squeezed out since Brad's come back in, and I think his form has suffered as a result of that. Because I still think his best position is as non-baller, but and he's only sort of an excuse at a half-forward flank.
Well, I don't think he was playing very well when Brad was out, to be honest with you, Macca.
Well, he wasn't dominating. I have to agree with that. Just on Brad Crouch, I thought he was our best inside mid on Saturday, and I think he's showing that he could not only extract the ball, but he had more time and he had pace, and he was starting to explode from the packs, and I think he's going to hit some really top form in the next few weeks. I was wrapped in his first 3 quarters. I think he faded a little bit in the fourth quarter, but I thought he was outstanding for the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, I agree. 9 clearances and 16 contested possessions out of his 34. And went at 82.5% disposal efficiency. So it was a really solid game from Brad. And Nick and I and 6 tackles along with that as well. Nick and I were commenting earlier that he's moving more freely every week. And it's a bonus for us coming into the finals. So that was all good. The other one that is a contentious big footy board talking point, David McKay.
Well, I thought he was fine.
Oh, not fine, Nicky. He's David McKay. He did some excellent things, and he did some average things, and he did some rotten things. That's how he plays. And overall, he was pretty reasonable, but there were still a couple of stinkers in there.
And he wasn't the only one.
No, he isn't. But of course, once you're the whipping boy,
and that's the thing.
Yeah, once you're the whipping boy, you get whipped every time you can error.
Look, I think the knock on David's game was that he only had the 6 kicks out of his 22 disposals. He probably needs to hurt teams more by foot, and he's becoming less and less effective by foot. As far as I can see, he had 6 inside 50s, but I don't think any of those were. Maybe one was to the particular advantage of one of our forwards. I wrote a little post on Big Footy earlier today about D-Mac, and to me, it's the closest I've watched him live all year, and he's very one-dimensional. He'll do the same thing over and over again. He doesn't try to dodge. He will now look for contact, and it's basically get ball, accept contact, lift arms, give off, and he does that repeatedly, and it seems to be his mode of playing. And if you hark back to our discussion with him at the beginning of the season, Nicky, he did come across as quite a task-focused or task-oriented kind of person, and benefited very much from clear direction and clearly defined roles. And I just wonder whether David just doesn't have the capacity to be that dynamic wingman that we're looking for. It's certainly in the last couple of seasons, because he just seems to be a very, a one-trick pony, if you like. He doesn't try and dodge and weave terribly much. He doesn't take many risks. There's just a lot of sameness about the way he plays.
Well, I can't argue with that, but just watching the way he's been playing, I think there's no doubt he's playing to orders in the manner of which he's playing, because I think they've told him to try and keep it as simple as possible and go in harder for the ball. I think that's probably clearly his instructions. That's how he's playing.
To me, it's interesting comparing him to Atkins and saying, the instructions, because Atkins hangs on to the ball too long sometimes and gets caught with holding the ball.
Yeah, I was just going to raise that point, Nicky. Atkins, again, got my wrath on at least 2 occasions, one which led to a goal by hanging on far too long. So, and he deserves a bit of a whip now and again, I think, Atkins, because he's getting a little bit too cocky, and he should just play a natural game in the sense that use the sidestep when it's necessary, but not use it to show he's got one.
I think at times over the last couple of weeks, Rory's probably suffered from. I think there's been some fairly clear instruction about certain styles of game that we've wanted to play over the last couple of weeks, and I think at times Rory's been caught overthinking instead of just playing with a little bit more natural instinct. But Rory Atkins' composure and poise with ball in hand compared to DMAC is chalk and cheese. You can't even compare the two.
No, I wasn't. But I'm saying I think at the moment he's got a little bit too much composure in the sense that he thinks he can do a little bit more than he really can. Because, on a couple of occasions that backfired. Look, he's got a neat sidestep, and he's pretty to watch when it's working. But I think that because of that, he's tending to do it a little bit too much. And if he, as you said, if he just reacted and did what comes naturally, he'd be a much better player.
Very interesting on the call is that Rue pointed out when one of those ones he gave away, and Rue was I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but he was like, "Yeah, he gets caught a couple of times, but that's fine." And I'm wondering, okay, is that a message for us picking on Rat because they're kind of happy with how he's going?
Actually, I watched the replay and I saw that comment that they do seem to be happy with or Rue is anyhow, but he's not the coach.
Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You know, I mean, we want players to move the ball dynamically and be creative and take risks. So when a guy does that and 80% of the time it comes off and 20% of the time it doesn't, if you bag the guy for doing that, you're going to lose the 80% of good very quickly. And I would hate to see Rory Atkins go back into his shell. I don't think it's epidemic at all, Macca, to be honest with you. I think he gets caught occasionally simply because he doesn't have the option that he's looking for up forward. But his ability to hold onto the ball, step through traffic and make good decisions more often than not, he went at 80% again this week. I think it's a real asset to the team. And I wouldn't like to quell that if I was coaching staff.
No, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. That and you're right that he's very, very good at it. But I'm saying he could be even better if he just played it just a little bit more naturally. Because sometimes I think he just overdoes it, and whereas I'm all for it when it's on, but sometimes he just takes it on a little bit too much.
Yeah.
For me, the one thing I want somebody to teach him is when he's been tackled and he's lying on the ground, not to just lie there like a dead fish. He needs to flop around a bit.
Yeah.
Because then he might not get so many holds. Because he just kind of, he just lies there. And it's like, oh, this is going to be holding the ball, Rat, because you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
One for you, Phoenix. I know you've got all the stats in front of you, so don't look at them. But who do you think was our number one tackler for the weekend?
Number one tackler I would have thought was Brodie Smith because I've already mentioned it.
You bugger. I thought that would be a lovely trick question because you wouldn't have expected that.
I've got one other thing though. Did you guys enjoy Luke Brown giving it to Matheson about ducking his head?
Yes, I did see that. Yeah, I did.
Once, because he did the duck, which got the high tackle from Talia, and even though he kicked the goal, if you watch on the replay, you actually see Luke Brown sort of miming ducking his head at Matheson and shaking his head at him.
Yeah,
I've noticed that from those boys a little bit.
You're making out his duck at his head, taking him off, yeah.
Yeah.
You're basically saying that's what you've done and we don't respect it.
So I don't think there's much more we can say about the game. I did want to make a little bit of a comment, and again, I touched on it this morning on Big Footy Boards. I was actually really impressed with Lepic's post-match press conference. Did either of you guys hear that?
No, I haven't. I didn't. I don't radio.
No, I haven't watched it yet,
and I haven't seen that part. No.
Well, I must admit, he was. They started asking him the usual questions, and he was his usual, belligerent self. But someone then asked him a relatively constructive question, And I suggest you go and have a listen to it if you're at all interested, because he was very clear and concise and displayed a very good understanding of where they're at and where they need to be. And he wasn't sugarcoating anything, and he wasn't making excuses. It was just a very concise, clear-headed answer. And I don't think there's, you say, Macca, that you don't rate him as a coach. I'd like to know what you'd like him to do with the list as they're currently placed that you don't think he's doing at the moment.
What is their game plan?
Well, at the moment, what game plan can you have when you're playing, 10 rookies?
I'll bet you that if he, and I do understand what you're saying about the rookies, but I'll bet you that when he's replaced, and he probably will be, that somebody will take those very same players and they'll do a lot better.
Oh, yeah, because they would have had a season's experience. People forget how Brisbane were going at the start of the year when they had a few senior blokes in.
I may be being
they weren't too bad.
But I just don't think he's after match talks have been extremely intelligent and don't show, to me, the same understanding of coaching that the other coaches do.
Well, I would suggest very, very strongly that you listen to his post-match presser, because I was a bit on the fence about him, probably leaning towards he's done his dash. But after listening to that presser, I think you'd agree with me that he's more than across what's going on at that club. He's got a very clear understanding of what he can and can't do. And as I said to Nikki at the beginning of the cast, I was actually very impressed that he didn't just throw numbers back behind the ball to minimise the damage. He allowed his team to play and learn.
It started off that way, Phoenix, but if you have a look at and watch the replay, you'll see that as the game progressed, that's exactly what did happen. They had nearly all their side in our forward line.
No. I think you'll find that the whole game was played in a very close, confined section of the ground. Even in the first quarter, I noticed quite early on that the game was basically played in 25% of the ground.
Yeah, but in that last quarter in particular, our forward line was totally clogged with players. If you have a look at the replay, you'll be surprised just how many players were in our forward line.
Do you reckon that's because we kept having repeat inside 50s? I mean, the ball hardly got out of our forward line.
I agree with that, but they then had the no escape structure. Once they got the ball in the back line, they couldn't get out.
Yeah, but that's what happens, mate. I mean, that's the whole thing about field position, and that's why it's so crucial to create forward pressure and try and keep the ball in the area, because you do make other players get sucked into that area of the ground, which then minimises their outlets. And Brisbane just aren't good enough by foot to work their way out under those circumstances. But I would defy you to point out where Leppich specifically started players behind the ball. I don't think you'll see any centre bounce, extra defenders. The only thing that he did do was man up our bloke coming off half-back. And he just wanted to play man-on-man footy all night, basically.
Well, yeah, he probably did, but that ended up with a very, very clogged forward line and nobody in their forward line.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you
but
want
that's
him
often,
to do?
Macca, when you get tired and you're chasing the ball and you hold it in so much, you get sucked into the ball. And that's what happened in that last quarter. They were so tired. As Gib on the chat said, we conceded 3 goals in the first quarter, 2 in the second, 1 in the third, and 0 in the last. And they were tired. They couldn't run. So that's what happens in those types of games. You all end up, it turns into a mini League One.
I know I'm being very harsh on him, but I don't rate him at all. And I think that we have been coach killers in the past, and I think we've probably killed another coach.
No, I disagree. 1,000%. Couldn't be more wrong, in my opinion, Macca. It's my turn to play anti-Macca this week.
Yeah, you are. You do a very good job so far. Nicky's been quite pleasant. But it was a very, very big defeat.
I actually agree with Phoenix.
Yeah, well, that's just my opinion. I think he's every chance to be gone at the end of the year.
I don't disagree with that simply because football's a fickle game and football clubs can be fickle and all the rest of it. But as I wrote in my post today, if I was a Brisbane Lions supporter, I would have obviously been terribly unhappy about the result and the season. But if I listened to my coach and the way he talked at the after-match press conference, I would have had confidence that at least he understands where they're at and he has some clear path in terms of where they're going. And similarly, if I was a board member, I would have been quite happy with the way that Lepage handled that press conference as well.
Well, I was listening to 5AA today, and they were taking the feed from 3AW, and they were talking about Lepage as a coach, and they were saying that they think that he will be replaced next year, and that he should be, in their opinion, replaced by Brett Ratton, and they have no doubt that Ratton with the same list would get far better results.
So Ratton's going to get a list with kids that have had a season under their belt, and he's also going to get the likes of Christensen and the Beans brothers back, as well as a couple of others. And so he's clearly going to have better results as a consequence. But you didn't answer my question earlier. What did you think of their performances at the beginning of the year when they did have personnel?
Then why not play some of those guys that were going good?
Because they're out injured, mate. They've got like 6 or 7 season-ending injuries in their squad. They're not playing them because they're out of form. They're playing them because they're injured.
Well, I'm probably okay. I'd have to have a look back and see, but I still don't rate him. I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can say I'm irrational, but I just don't feel that he comes up each week with a real feel of the game, and I think there will be a better coach than him, and I think they'll do better with a better coach.
Yeah, but will a better want to go up to Brisbane?
I don't know whether Brett Ratton goes to Queensland, does he? Especially in that rabble.
Well, they're rabble now.
Well, the club is a rabble.
I actually don't think there's that many coaches would want to.
The club is a rabble.
It is a rabble, but the AFL have said that they will feed them the appropriate amount of money next year so they can compete on equal terms.
So when people compare a bloke like Ratton, if he goes up there next year, to Lepage this year, not only is he being compared on the basis of more fit players, but also a better funded football department, and you think that's going to be a fair comparison?
No, it won't be a fair comparison. But unfortunately, Lepage is the man that's there now. And he chose to apply for that job, knowing what conditions he was going to be coaching upon, and knowing what players he had at his disposal. And you know that's the way of coaching. You live and die by your results.
There's no doubt about that.
I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not for one moment, but that's the way it works.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth. I'll be interested if you do actually have a look at that press conference, Macca, to see if your opinion changes at all.
I will do that. No, I promise you I'll do that.
And if it doesn't, I'll just put you on mute, because my bloody show.
Yeah. Yes, Phoenix, Nicky Mark too.
Oh, dear. Anyway, look, I think that's about it. We've gone far longer than we should have. I thought it was going to be a 30-minute podcast tonight, but then you turned up half pissed, Macca, and that was the end of that.
That's the way of the world, isn't it?
It's always his fault.
Oh, so anyone but me. That's the way I'm operating today. It's anyone's fault but mine. Now, who we got next week? We got Freo over there. Any dangers? Any fears?
Yeah.
They played not too badly today, but they won't win, though. We will win.
They got very tired trying to play that way.
They did, didn't they? They actually played reasonably good football in the first half, and I was thinking, I hope they can keep going like that and knock West Coast off. But no, as Nicky quite rightfully said, they couldn't maintain that same game, that same pressure. And there's no doubt he's trying to teach them another game plan, because the one that he had before was outdated and was never going to win a grand final. So quite rightfully he has to change. But they just can't maintain it. And also they have some, when you talk about key players, they've got some star players out.
Yeah. Probably players equivalent to Dane Beams or blokes like that. But anyway, I don't think they hold any particular fears to us over there.
Are there plural Dane Beams? Are there?
Well, there's a couple. Christensen probably goes all right.
He's a dud, transferred from Geelong.
Get off.
Yeah, we'll just let him go. Just let him go. Let him dig his hole.
No, it's all good.
Keep going.
No, it's all good. We got to wind this up, Macca. And it's your fault for being late.
Yep.
Right, you get cut off. Freo next week. I don't personally think that they hold any fears for us. I think their best at the moment isn't anywhere near enough to match us. So hopefully another good win over there. And obviously now sitting in third spot, and with Sydney in our sights, still a chance to be top two. So it's pretty much all in our hands now, so you'd be pretty disappointed if we didn't take care of Fremantle next week.
Serious question. What margin are you tipping us to win by?
I'd say 10 goals.
Yeah, it stole my thunder. That's about mine.
Any game over there is a 10-goal margin. It doesn't matter how well the opposition's travelling, I think is a good margin.
Can't argue with that.
Well, now that we've agreed, Macca, we probably should quit while we're ahead, mate.
Yeah, Nikki hadn't put her throttles in yet.
What do you reckon, Nick?
I don't think it'll be 10 goals. I think it'll be around the 40-50 mark.
Goals?
I'd be quite pleased if it was 10 goals.
And on that note...
No, points.
On that note, guys, let's...
I can do math occasionally.
Let's leave it till Tuesday night for a more in-depth discussion. Obviously, for those listening, thank you very much for joining us on the chat tonight. You can catch us, obviously, on Spreaker.com/user/AFL Crowcast. You can catch us on iTunes. And please don't be shy. Give us a review on iTunes if that's how you listen to us, because it does bump us up the ratings a little bit. As we mentioned last week, there's a new home. Check it out, crowsfanscentral.com, which we'll be building as we go along. So get around that and give us your thoughts. And obviously visit us on Twitter and Facebook. But until Tuesday night live, I'll say good night to both of you.
Good night, Felix. Good night, Nikki. Good night, all.
Bye.